Years ago, many years ago, when my son first started dating his now wife, I said to him, wouldn't it be cool if there was a dating show about people on the autism spectrum, about young people dating? And my son Sam said, Mom, nobody would watch something like that. And as it turns out, a lot of people were very interested in watching something like that. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Kaylin, who I think many of you recognize from the fabulous show Love on the Spectrum. But first, I just want to say a couple of details. All the mics are going to be turned off throughout this presentation. If you guys have questions, feel free to type them into the chat. And at the end of the presentation, I'm sure we'll be able to get to several of them. Kaylyn's, I'm sure we'll be able to get to some of them. I wanted to let you guys all know that this presentation is being recorded. So I'm so thrilled to introduce you to Kaylynn. Kaylynn Partlow was diagnosed with autism at the age of 10 years old. She joined Project Hope Foundation's school program as a teenager, where she developed an interest in working with others on the spectrum. In 2015, she joined Project Hope Foundation as a registered behavior technician, and she's now a lead technician, providing services to middle and high school age clients and helping to develop staff training content. In 2021, Kaylynn was a featured participant in Netflix series Love on the Spectrum, and she's been a guest on numerous national podcasts and published several articles, providing an autistic perspective. She uses her social media account as a platform for autism advocacy, reaching millions of people across the world. So with that, I want to introduce you to Kaylynn.
My mother always knew I was different, starting at a very early age. I've always struggled with keeping friends, tolerating change, and sorting through sensory input. My mom brought up concerns about autism to the pediatricians, but I like to joke that in the 90s, girls couldn't catch autism, which is why I was diagnosed later in childhood. It wasn't until I became a third grader who still couldn't read a chapter book that I was able to be assessed by professionals for any kind of disability. As a direct result of my educational challenges, when I was 10, my uncle paid for extensive academic and psychological testing in Orlando. My expression in this picture is reflective of the fact that prior to exploring Disney with my family, I had to play with the nice ladies for a couple of days. It was at that time that I received my autism diagnosis.
As a little girl, she may know she's different, but not yet have the words to describe how or why. She may only have a few close friends, or she may choose to immerse herself within her interests for hours, collecting endless amounts of information. She might work hard to keep her composure at school and around friends and extended family, but when she finally returns to her sanctuary, she may melt down as a result of bottled up emotions accumulated throughout the day. The world around her can feel too loud, too bright, and too smelly. She often finds herself unable to accurately predict the intentions and actions of the people she's close to. Through careful observation of social interaction, she learns to mimic the mannerisms of others. She quickly connects this mimicry with social acceptance from her peers, despite not always being able to perform it reliably. In fact, her inconsistent brand of social niceties, small talk, and reciprocal conversation might be what you saw first if you knew what to look for. Her renditions of normalcy earn unspoken and mostly unconscious ratings by others, ranging anywhere from deserving of an Emmy Award to stiff and uncanny. Entering adolescence, she continues to perfect her craft and is more or less able to mask her social difficulties. Aside from the people closest to her, no one is fully aware of how she struggles to cope with small changes, keep her body still and quiet, and control her emotions. Moving into adulthood and out of the comfort of living with her mother, she finds that sometimes the demands of adult life exceed her current abilities. Adulthood has unearthed the gaps in her skill sets that weren't as pronounced or prohibitive in childhood. Eventually, she learns the word to describe this wasn't weird. The word for this is autism, and she finds the support she needs to continue to thrive.
As I continued to fall behind my peers, both academically and socially, the private elementary school I was attending told my family they could no longer serve me. My mom knew the public schools wouldn't be any better in terms of providing the specialized resources I required. With that in mind, she decided to do it herself and homeschool me. Having your mom as a teacher as a preteen girls as a preteen girl has its ups and downs, as you might imagine. But ultimately, it was a way to connect me to environments that prioritized growth at my pace. Homeschool co-op groups were an important part of my social development from ages 11 to 13, as they were largely comprised of kids who were tolerant and accepting of differences. This supportive social environment allowed me to practice interpersonal skills like initiating and maintaining friendships. In addition to having access to a supportive group of my peers, my mom hired a specialized tutor to work with me a few times a week on a variety of skills with a heavy emphasis on reading. My tutor, Miss Lynn, was certified in the Orton-Gillingham approach, which is one of the few evidence-based interventions for dyslexia. They say all good things come to an end, and as I entered adolescence, the combination of puberty and autism began to put an extra pressure on my relationship with my mom. This pressure made it increasingly challenging for her to facilitate my education at home. So just like she's always done, my mom searched for solutions and enrolled me in Project Hope Foundation's school program. Sitting in that rocking chair at the age of 13 as I completed my first evaluation, I never would have guessed all the ways this nonprofit organization would change my life. Project Hope has a school for kids on the autism spectrum where students are provided with individualized education. What's special about Project Hope is that they don't just stop at meeting needs. They're responsive to the student's interests, and they take steps to help each student pursue their passions. In my case, I was interested in bird watching and dog training, so they created the option for me to take dog training classes during the school day. And when I finished my assignments, my teacher gave me binoculars to search for birds on. In between classwork, dog training, and bird watching, I developed an interest in helping the younger kids who needed more support. In response, Project Hope created an internship for me to work toward various goals in helping the teachers. My senior year of high school was spent developing the skills needed to become employable with the goal of working for Project Hope's therapy program after graduation. We practiced time management, interview skills, workplace etiquette, and they were even able to add therapist training courses to my academic time. After meeting those goals in 2015, I've been on staff with Project Hope as a registered behavior technician ever since. Project Hope has educational, therapeutic, and adult programs serving people across the lifespan. This diversity has allowed me to accumulate a well-rounded clinical experience across a broad range of abilities. I've worked with clients as young as 3 and as old as 20. My clinical experience is wide, ranging from teaching individuals who use a device to communicate, to providing community, home, and clinical support to clients with extensive histories of dangerous behavior, to working on higher-level social and executive functioning skills at an adult level. As you know, I got the opportunity to participate in the Netflix series Love on the Spectrum. That experience opened several doors for me, but unfortunately, none of those doors had a boyfriend behind them. Instead, one of the most noteworthy things that happened after the show aired was the explosion of my social media. Even a full year after Love on the Spectrum aired, my online content reaches at least 2 million accounts every 30 days. My entire social media presence is dedicated to dispensing the most authentic autism and behavior analytic information any single individual could hope to portray. Before Netflix, I had a decently large following on my Facebook page. After Netflix, it was clear I needed to expand my content beyond relatable autism memes and into content with more substance, delivered in a video format.
Many language-abled autistic people like myself feel what we call too different to be normal, but too normal to be different. We can feel as though we have one foot in your world as neurotypicals and another foot in the world of having a neurodevelopmental disability. We have too many skills to be true peers alongside those with more profound symptoms, but yet somehow not enough skills to fit in with non-disabled peer groups. And what I didn't realize until recently was that this stuck in the middle feeling was never a life sentence in limbo. In fact, I'm not stuck anywhere. I can move freely between the two worlds, even if I don't have a zip code in either of them. Instead, I reside on the bridge that connects our two worlds and have the unique ability to deliver messages between them. I'm certainly not the first to live on the bridge, but let's just say my unique ability to translate and run messages between the world of autism service provider and the autistic community is worthy of a pay upgrade.
I'm in the unique position to open a productive dialogue between the world of autistic people and autism service providers.
I'm speaking at the International ABA Conference, and I want you to understand why. ABA has been considered the gold standard of autism treatment, but has recently received a great deal of criticism. My goal is to open an honest discussion from an autistic perspective. This will include sharing strategies for improving compassionate care practices. I'm hopeful that this will encourage clinicians to seek out and listen to autistic voices.
If I had to summarize the goal of my social media content in one word, it would be possibilities. Looking at my life, I want autistic people, as well as their teachers, therapists, friends, and family members, to see a reflection of possibilities in their own lives. I think it's my position on the bridge between the world of autistic people and autism service provider that make me relatable to both audiences. I am fortunate to have a robust support system. I have a family who's always been there for me and an organization that works hard to help people like me live meaningful and fulfilling lives. All that to say, having a supportive community of family, friends, and service providers is a crucial component to helping people on the spectrum to thrive. And that was all I had.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I have some questions for you, Kaylin, following that terrific presentation. So your video describes your transition from thinking about your behavior as, quote, weird, to understanding yourself as a person with autism. How do you view and think about your behavior now?
I think self-acceptance is kind of an ongoing journey, and I don't know that there's necessarily an end to that, you know? Like, I think I was saying the other day that I think self-acceptance kind of comes in stages. So like, for example, when I was in high school, I pretty quickly accepted my diagnosis when I became more familiar with it and got more information. But then when my peers went to college and then started getting married and started having babies, and I wasn't necessarily doing those things, you know, maybe you take a few steps back in terms of self-acceptance, but it's like a few steps back and a few steps forward, which is kind of a wordy way of saying that I think, you know, like I said, self-acceptance is a journey. And where you are at this stage of your life might not be where you are with it in the next stage of your life.
Thank you. How do you feel about being a person with autism now?
I mean, personally, it works out pretty good. It's allowed me to make connections that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, overall, I would say that it definitely maybe causes more issues than it solves, but I think I've been lucky in that I've been able to use it to kind of play to my strengths and make connections that, like I said, wouldn't have otherwise happened without it.
Okay, thank you. So you attended a private elementary school, a homeschool co-op group, and then Project Homeschool. Can you tell us about your school and homeschool experiences? For example, what was good for you about each one of those things? What positive memories do you have about each placement that you had?
Well, see, the funny part about that is when I was tested for learning disabilities, and, you know, when I had that assessment back in Orlando, in addition to finding a bunch of learning disabilities, I was also diagnosed with some pretty measurable impairments in short-term and working memory. And maybe they got to go back in and check for long-term issues, because I mean, I could tell you the narrative of my story and I remember bits and pieces, but to give specific examples is kind of challenging. I mean, when I was younger, homeschool was usually up for debate. And I find that that's true for a lot of homeschool families, that, you know, they can kind of pick, which is nice. You know, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can kind of pick and choose which subjects you work on. You can pick and choose which times you work on them, which, like I said, it's a nice flexibility bonus. But then when you know, encounter puberty, you turn it, you don't want to, you know, mom says it's time for school and you say, no, I'm good. Which is not really an option, right? Which is partly how we found Project Hope.
Okay, great. Do you remember, particularly when you were in school, in your school settings, you're learning emotional feelings at the time, behavior? What were the biggest challenges for you when you were in a school setting? Can you remember?
I think for me personally, you know, in terms of emotional challenges at school, I encountered a lot of failure. You know, I joke that I failed the 3rd grade, but I did. You know, the teacher would give me a 0 on my assignments, and it got to the point where she would hand out the assignment and I would just grade it for myself. I mean, I would do the assignment, but before I, right where you write your name, I would fill in the grades so that she didn't have to do it. And I'd write a big old 0. She called it a goose egg. And I'd just go ahead and do that for her. And the adults in my life did not like when I did that, but I was right most of the time. I wasn't able to kind of meet the requirements in a lot of different subjects. And it definitely resulted in a lot of issues. My mom said that I would cry in the mornings and beg her not to take me to school. I would cry at night saying that I wasn't meant for this world, which is a pretty heavy thought to have at the age of 9 or 10, So I would say that I was definitely not in a good place at that time.
Okay. When did that turn for you? Do you remember a good experience when you were while you were still in school that kind of turned that for you, that you weren't dreading it and it didn't feel like you were a failure, you felt successful?
Yeah, that didn't happen until high school. So when I was 13 and I entered my freshman year of high school at Project Hope.
Okay. And do you remember something that a teacher did or an administrator or someone at the school did that you think helped you feel more positive?
Yeah, I think just the change in environment. I went from a small private school with the class was maybe 15 kids to, when I went to Project Hope, that was a class of, I was one of 4 for several years. So it was a much smaller classroom environment. There was just one teacher for the entirety of the high school, which was just 4 of us. And then we had opportunities to interact with the younger kids in the other grades. We'd go to recess with them, we'd do lunch with them, which gave me a lot of opportunity to kind of explore interacting with children and explore that as a potential career after graduation.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like you were talking about your mom. It sounds like she was just an incredible advocate for you. It also sounds like she accepted you as you were, but she also pushed you past what you felt comfortable with. Can you talk a little bit about what was it like for you during the time that your mom was pushing you past your comfort zone? How did you
As much as
feel?
I hated it, I think it was good for me. I was certainly resistant to it, as most. She did really well was exposed me to a variety of activities. We did horseback riding and basketball through the church, and we did all kinds of things, dog training, things that I wasn't maybe necessarily interested in, but things that she wanted to expose me to, not necessarily for career options, but just, to have opportunities to build connections with people and to practice, social skills. It was an opportunity for that. And like I said, I was resistant to it, but ultimately I think it was really, really good for me looking back on it.
Okay. And what were the feelings when you realized that your mom accepted you, your autism, your behavior, your moods? Part of it, of course, was just adolescence, but what were those feelings that you remember or you feel now about feeling accepted by her?
I think she accepts the circumstances, but she is always pushing for more from me. Even, I turned 27 last week, and she's always pushing for more, which, as an adult is sometimes frustrating, but I think it was that quality specifically that really contributed to my long-term success. So as much as I'm annoyed by it now at the age of 27, because I think it's silly and unnecessary for her to push me still, I think it was really that trait that she has to continue to push me that is what made me so successful.
Thank you. So you had said that Project Hope individualized instruction for you and prepared you to work for them post high school. And you talked a little bit about some of the strategies that they used. Can you talk a little bit more about, you had said that they worked on time management and a couple of other things. Was there anything else that they did for you that you feel really enabled you to transition right to your current job?
I think being prepared for all the specific responsibilities I was going to have was really helpful, because we did that for a full year and maybe a little bit afterwards, because I don't think I was hired right when I turned 18. It was probably the summer of that year. So I think getting experience with the technical aspect of things, this is how we send emails, this is how we use the data collection software. And then also, we worked on getting some clinical experience. This is how we interact with different types of learners. This is how we communicate with different types of learners. And having that hands-on practice really prepared me. I kind of think it gave me a leg up on people who had worked there the same amount of time as me technically, but I still had a lot of experience that they maybe didn't have. So I think that was one thing that was really helpful, is just having that hands-on practice.
So you had the hands-on practice, and you had also said that you think you have some short-term memory issues, and also, some processing issues. Did they do anything in your training that you think particularly enabled you to be as successful as you've been with this job? How did you remember all the stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. One thing that was kind of helpful, even at a basic level, was, I had goals that I was working on, be that professionalism or maybe just increasing some clinical skills, especially in the beginning. And so I would self-monitor where I was in that process throughout the week, and then report back to a supervisor, after the interval had, passed. So maybe it was a week, maybe it was 2 weeks, maybe it was 4 weeks, bring back, this is my sheet, this is what I've been working on, this is where I'm at. And it was usually tied to some sort of, reinforcement. There was something positive to look forward to, which was really motivating for me throughout high school and as an employee in the very beginning.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about love on the spectrum. Can you first talk about how were your sensory needs and other people on the cast? How did they address that? I mean, obviously, I actually don't know much about the directors or the producers and what their knowledge was of autism, but first, when you all started coming together, how did they help you guys with being together, being under the lights, the whole thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to what they did for the rest of the cast, because it wasn't until very recently that I had met them. Because people think that we have met each other, and we really, they did not take efforts to let us get to know each other. That was a thing that we did on our own well after the show had aired. But for me specifically, in terms of addressing sensory issues, I had access to fidget toys, and they said we could ask for a break. I am not usually one to ask for a break unless I absolutely need it. So I really just I used the suck it up method. And they were long days. We filmed for 8 hours a day with a lunch break. But it was a lot of work. I don't think I've been that level of tired from anything else before in my life.
I bet. So being filmed on a date, handling the dynamics of a potential romantic partner sounds challenging for anyone. What was that like for you?
If I had to summarize it in one word, I would say that it was sweaty. First dates are anxiety inducing for everybody. And I guess from my perspective, adding a camera to it, it sucks already. You can't really make it suck worse. It's already pretty terrible. So why not add one more thing? It really did not bother me. And they were really good about kind of blending into the background. Like they say, oh yeah, you won't even notice us. And it's not something you believe. Like, of course I'm going to notice you. You've got a giant camera. But they were right. Once you kind of start to get engaged with whatever that other activity is, you really do kind of forget that they're there.
Okay. So it wasn't scripted at all.
No, none of it was scripted. The closest thing that we ever came to that was if somebody had said something funny or somebody had said something meaningful, and then a truck went by or an airplane flew over, that would screw up their audio. So they would stop you and make you say it again. But it was a thing that you had said, not a thing that they had asked you to say.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So what about the experience of being on Love on the Spectrum was expected, and what did you not expect from that experience?
To be honest, I am a very pessimistic person. So I had little to no expectations from this situation. I did not go into it expecting to find the love of my life. I did not go into it really, I didn't know what to expect. So this is just such a wild experience that most people have. It's not even like a thing you can ask. You can ask people, oh, what was your first job interview like? Everybody's got an experience with that, but nobody that I knew had any experience with being on international television before. So there really were no expectations, I don't think.
What did you learn about yourself being on the show?
I think the biggest lesson I learned was it's cliche because I've heard other people say it before, but it is true. Just this idea of doing it scared, that just because you feel scared doesn't mean that you can't do it. You know, you just take your scared feelings and you do it anyways. You do it scared. Because if you wait till you feel better, you're gonna get nothing done.
Great advice for sure. So we do have a lot of questions. So before we get to that, can you tell us right now, are you living independently?
Mostly, I mean, I live with roommates and I still don't know how to cook, but they don't know how to mow the lawn. So it's a trade-off, really.
How do you negotiate that? You're living with how many people?
Two. And my perspective on the division of labor is a little different than maybe their perspective is. I do a lot around the house. You know, I do all the sweeping and the vacuuming and the tidying and the dishes. Well, I help with the dishes. I do the yard by myself. And I live with my best friend and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend does all the cooking and most of the dishes. And she watches TV. So that is kind of our division of labor.
And that sounds sort of like a division of labor for sure. How is that working out? I'm sure there's ups and downs, but overall, how is that for you?
There's definitely ups and downs. I sometimes feel frustrated about just our differences in terms of how we might like to do things or how we might like to keep the house. But ultimately, I do not want to live alone. I do not like being alone. I like to be around people and I like to be doing things and I like to be busy. So I think, you know, if I lived alone, yeah, the house could maybe be kept a little tidier, but then I'd be lonely. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Can you tell us, are you still dating? Are you in a romantic relationship with anyone?
You know, I've kind of given up on that. If it happens, great. But I've really stopped putting in effort to pursue it just because I don't know. Nothing has changed since my complaints on the show about Tinder with the fish pictures. Nothing has changed. And now if anything, it's gotten worse because I don't know who will recognize me, right? You know, and then there's this discrepancy between they've got all this information about me, but I don't know who they are. They know my first name, my last name. They know all this about me. And usually I get a couple of selfies with a first name and maybe 2 sentences in a bio. And it's just it makes dating even more challenging, I think, because now there's so much about me on the internet.
Yeah, I'm sure that must be really, really, really challenging.
Yeah.
So is there another way? I mean, are you pretty social? You'll go to parties, meet people that way, or are you pretty much meeting, people through your roommates and other friends?
I mean, not really either one. I mean, to go to parties, you'd have to like get invited to parties, and I don't ever get invited to parties. I think the show and the online stuff has really kind of created a bigger divide between me and my coworkers. I've never really had friends at work to begin with, but now I really don't have friends at work because I don't know. I really don't know why. I am not very friendly, but I am very nice when you talk to me. So
You sure are. Yeah, you seem
I
very
won't initiate
responsive.
it, but if somebody else initiates, I will continue the conversation, but I guess nobody is bold enough to initiate.
So you feel like being on the show has intimidated people from approaching you? Is that what you're saying?
I
Okay.
think so. And my position in the company has kind of changed. And I don't know if it's like they're jealous of the favoritism sort of thing. Because I've got a modified work schedule. I've got my own desk in the supervisor office, things that people at my level don't typically have, but people at my level don't typically have the skill level that I do. So, but they don't understand that.
So are you the only ex-student that is working there?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
No? There's another one?
There's another one?
Apparently there's another. Lisa says there's another
Okay.
one.
Okay.
This is news to me.
Well, so you learned something tonight.
Yep.
And so since the show, we're getting some idea of some of the challenges of of what it's been like for you, the recognition, and people seemingly knowing you. How else would you describe this part of your life, post show, post, post getting a job and living independently?
I would say that it's extremely busy. Just April alone, I'm taking what, 3 trips, 4 trips? Yeah. Just to speak in different locations across the country. I've got webinars, a couple every month. It's a lot of stuff. There's a lot. And then add on top of that content creation, and I'm still working full time. So
Right.
I've been incredibly busy.
That sounds like a lot. Yeah, for sure. And public speaking for you in front of an audience, how is that going for you?
I prefer that to virtual just because I don't know, it just feels more real. Virtual
Okay.
just sometimes feels like you're talking to yourself.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I want to take some questions. So let's see if I can.
It's like red. It's like this one right here.
All right.
No, that one. Yeah, or maybe both.
All right. First question. Is this the first one? No, there's way more. Sorry. I'm just gonna keep scrolling up. So here's a question from a parent. What is the best way a parent can support their child with autism to help them thrive and succeed?
I think being involved in whatever services they choose to pursue, be that, just through what the public school offers, or, through speech therapy or occupational therapy, ABA therapy, whatever it is that they do, I think the best advice just for anybody is just that the parents be involved, because, as a service provider, I can tell you the worst thing is when parents drop their kids off and say, here, you fix him, call me when he's better. And that's just not how this works. It's not like that. And parents who have that sort of attitude, their children unfortunately do not usually get to see the meaningful gains that they otherwise could have had the parent been involved and participating in whatever it is that they're pursuing.
Do you remember when you were going through school, a particular a therapist who connected with you, or an adult outside of school who connected with you, and you remember thinking this was very helpful, or I just feel very connected to this person in a way I haven't felt before?
As a child, I think I experienced that with a lot of the adults that I interacted with. Adults usually liked me a lot. And as an adult now, that means old people usually like me a lot. I don't know. I guess I could take a guess as to why that might be. I got along better with adults than I did with children. Not that I didn't get along with children, but it was a little bit easier with adults because I was always very conversational. And kids maybe were not, or would not go along with my conversational preferences the way that adults did. So whichever adults I encountered in close proximity, be that, tutors or teachers, usually, we did develop a pretty close relationship for the most part.
Okay. What advice do you have for a new behavior tech to help the kids be their authentic self, but also follow treatment?
I think that having a setting aside time to pursue someone's interests is really important. Whatever that looks like for that particular individual, but then also balancing that with exposure to new activities can also be really, really helpful.
Okay. All right. This is from somebody saying, I imagine you came across so many service providers over your years. How do you think providers could best support individuals in your shoes going forward?
In what context?
I don't know. Can Danny go off mic to tell us what the context is?
Hey, yes, I did send a follow-up question later down the road, so maybe that one will help.
Okay. All right. We'll try after that. Somebody wants to know where Project Hope is.
It's in upstate South Carolina.
South Carolina. Okay. I know how it feels to be different. Was it hard fitting in with others too?
Yeah, I would say fitting in with others has always been hard, and it's not a thing that I've been able to figure out. I still don't have friends at work. So yeah, it's still hard.
The roommates that you have, you're clearly fitting in with them. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I'm a fantastic roommate. I mow the lawn. I take care of the floors. There's a lot of benefits to living with me. I pay my rent on time. I've never had a problem with that. I keep
So
everybody on schedule.
do the three of you ever hang out, watch TV, or do some activities? So you're not mowing the lawn then. So why do they want to hang out with you?
Usually I'm a pretty good time. My roommate, who's my best friend, she does a lot of dances. She does like I know swing dancing isn't the right word. I don't know what the right, it's adjacent to swing dancing. And she kind of runs the local dance for that. So she's always got friends over. And she's been really, really busy lately. So we've not gotten to spend a whole lot of time together. But when we're both available and I'm not traveling and she's not dancing, we like to go shopping or go out to eat or sometimes watch TV.
Okay. So it sounds like you're very comfortable with her
Yeah.
and you're meeting a lot of her friends. What's that like for you when they're all hanging out in your apartment? How do you feel?
Mm, she's got a lot. She's got more friends than a human being really should have, realistically, I think. They have this like revolving door. Like it's people that I've met. I never know their names. It's like a new person every single time. And I don't usually like to have people over, at least not like that, but they'll spend the night. I got home from work last week and there was a dude sitting on the couch and I had to text her and be like, who is this? And why is he here? He's waiting for his ride to the airport apparently, but he was there. There's always people in and out.
That sounds really challenging. Do you feel anxious at that moment, or you're just sort of puzzled by his
Yeah,
presence?
no, it definitely stresses me out. The tricky situation I'm in is they own the house and I pay rent to them.
Got it. Okay.
That's kind of how that works. I also have the biggest room in the house, which is nice because I spend a lot of time there.
Yeah. So you definitely get your own private area. And then if you want to be social, you can.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds like the best of both worlds for sure. What was your path like to living on your own with a roommate as you did on the show?
Um, It was kind of unexpected because Gracie and I were friends already. And she had told me that her roommate was getting married and that she was going to move out. And that's why she thought it'd be a great idea for us to live together. And because she is also employed by Project Hope and has extensive experience working with individuals with autism, she thought it would be just a great opportunity for us to live together. Um, so that's kind of how that worked. And it was definitely difficult in the beginning.
Difficult, how?
Just in the sense of like, I feel like nobody can really be prepared for all the responsibilities that you suddenly get once you live on your own. You are now solely responsible for grocery shopping and dealing with your own emotions. If you had a bad day, that's your problem. If you didn't go to the grocery store, that's your problem. If you don't want to do the dishes, that's your problem. Your mom's not going to do that for you. There's nobody to do it for you. And that was a really difficult adjustment. And it still kind of is at times.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how your mom felt, but speaking as a mom with autism, it's very hard to let your kids do that. Knowing that some of those things aren't going to happen, but it sounds like she did. She stepped
Oh,
aside.
she did. She did. I mean, she was very sad about it, but
Yeah.
she did let me go.
Yeah, that sounds really challenging, but good for her. Let's see. I think it's great that the participants organized social interaction that was not considered by the production crew. So I think what they're saying is that you guys just figured out how to get together, even though it wasn't organized by the crew. Yeah, I think that's pretty great too. Are you still friends with some of the people that were in the cast?
Yeah, we talk online periodically. They all live so far away from me that, it's not really practical for us to get together very often, but we talk online every now and then.
Did any of the participants end up together?
Yeah, I mean, Abby and David are still together. Danny's got somebody from season 2. So yeah, some of them did.
Okay. I think I also saw that you're an RBT yourself, which is amazing. I think it would give providers so much insight to hear your perspective about delivering services while being on the spectrum yourself.
Yeah, it definitely does. I'm speaking at CASP in the next couple of weeks. I'm speaking at ABAI in Philadelphia again this year, and a couple other ABA conferences.
Okay. Is there a way to explain what it's like as being someone on the spectrum? I mean, I know we don't have that much time, and I'm sure it's a very long answer, but if you could attempt, is there a way to explain what it's like for you when you were a student and in the same place that you're working? What is that experience like delivering ABA services to children, knowing, I think, probably how they might be feeling, because you probably experienced some of that anxiety or those emotions as well, as a person who has specific instructions about how you're supposed to deliver those services. What's that like for you?
I think, the clients that I've been able to talk to about my experiences and about my diagnosis are always very surprised. This week I got asked, is it true that you really have autism? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, well, I do too. And I said, I know. And then we just kind of moved on from it, which is kind of nice that it's not just like this earth-shattering topic, that these kids, they are in an environment that prioritizes a certain amount of self-awareness and self-acceptance. And so a casual conversation about autism is not really noteworthy to them. It's just kind of your average Tuesday. It's not a thing that evokes large emotions, because we've just kind of accepted it as this is just kind of part of it, which is kind of really nice, because I know a lot of other environments don't really operate that way.
Why do you think he was surprised to hear that you have autism?
Probably because it's not a conversation he's likely had with a lot of other adults. He was able to label that there are some other people in his life that experience disability. He said that his brother, I think, has Tourette's, but he's not really encountered other people besides his classmates that are on the spectrum. And I don't know that he's ever encountered another adult who has autism. So I think he thought that that was kind of unexpected.
Okay. I mean, I remember from your slides, you said that you weren't diagnosed till you were 10. And I think that most, certainly for boys, they seem to be diagnosed much earlier than girls. Do you think that's still true, or has that changed?
From what I've understood about just diagnosis as it works now, that girls are still several years behind boys in terms of diagnosis. And a lot of people have different theories as to why that might be. So hopefully that will get looked into more and eventually mitigated.
What do you think? Why do you think girls are diagnosed at a much slower rate or delayed rate?
I think two things. I think one reason is it has to do with language ability. And this is just, I don't know that this is scientific necessarily, but it just appears as though that girls maybe don't struggle quite as much with the language aspect of the diagnosis. And more importantly, I think girls, and this is stereotyping for sure, but tend to be more socially motivated than boys. Like I said, not everybody experiences that. There are certainly girls who are not socially motivated, but I think because girls can sometimes be more socially motivated, it lends itself to us learning to mimic social skills and to kind of conceal parts of our diagnosis that maybe a boy of that same age and level of development might not.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. My daughter saw a post where Kaelynn voiced a fingerprint to represent autism instead of a puzzle piece. She was curious why the fingerprint was there and what did it mean?
I think the fingerprint is a good representation of individuality and uniqueness. A lot of people in the autism community do not like the puzzle piece, which really kind of sucks, because What I didn't say in that video, because I just simply did not have time, is I have always liked the puzzle piece. I know that it's associated with Autism Speaks, and that's not super popular in the community anymore either. But Autism Speaks aside, if you can separate that, which a lot of people cannot, but Autism Speaks aside, I really have always enjoyed the puzzle piece and thought it was a great descriptor of my story. But because so many in the autism community do not share that opinion with me, and I never liked the infinity symbol, I thought potentially proposing an alternative would be kind of a way to bridge those gaps and connect us a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you. Are you doing any professional work with dogs or just your own pet?
Just my own dog. Nobody
Just
else.
yourself.
Not anymore.
Okay. Okay. Any chance we'll be seeing Kaylin on season 3 of Love on the Spectrum?
Probably not.
Follow up. My daughter wants to get more understanding to support her brother in the right way. Okay. Would you consider acting in a commercial film if you like the character in the script and the message of the film? No promises, might still be sweaty.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay. It's not a hard no. Have you always been this fluid with conversations, or has it been a work in progress? I love your observations and the way you describe things.
I would say probably. I spoke early, so I was speaking intelligibly at the age of 8 months, which I've actually learned is, I don't know about common for girls on the spectrum, but has been noted in research that that is a phenomenon that does occur. I think from what I read in my evaluation, the issue with language that I encountered was the pragmatic use of it, not necessarily the fluency of it.
I appreciate your content and sharing your life with us. I have a 4-year-old son with autism, and I would appreciate any advice on how to include myself in the therapies because our ABA company doesn't give us assignments. So how can I get my son excited for potty training? Treats or tablet time don't seem to be motivating anymore. Lots of accidents, refusal for number 2 on the potty. Sorry, TMI, but would appreciate any out of the box advice you may have.
For potty training specifically, or?
I think, yeah, specifically for that.
I've potty trained a couple of people. I mean, it definitely takes time and patience. It's one of those non-negotiables that has to happen. I was talking, Gracie my roommate, she works at Project Hope as well. And she works with the more profoundly affected population. And we were just talking just last night about how, autistic people, inherently, we are a vulnerable population. And the more we can do for ourselves, especially as it relates to self-care, the safer we are. The rates of sexual abuse in autistic people will really just crush your soul if you go and look for them, because it is truly horrifying. And if you don't need someone to help you in the restroom, it lowers your chances of being a victim. If you can do more for yourself, especially in those areas.
That's a really good point.
So,
Yeah.
which sounds like kind of grim and terrible, but all that to say, don't give up. We've got to find a way. Maybe the traditional approach isn't working. And I don't know that I can give specific advice, but just don't give up.
What about including the mom in therapies? It doesn't sound like the agency she's using is really facilitating that. What could she do to try
short
to
of contacting the agency and requesting, specific ways to be involved, I'd switch.
Okay.
I don't know that that's feasible. And I understand that everybody's circumstances are different, but I think it is really important to have parent participation in organizations who do not prioritize that. To me, that's a red flag.
Because you had said earlier that when the parents are involved, the outcomes are quite different than when the parents aren't involved. Okay, thank you. Do you have any tips or advice for tracking maintenance for healthcare needs, including making the appointments, advocating for your concerns, and navigating insurance?
That's a tricky one. Recently, I was offered a partnership to work with a brand called Human. Was it Human? Yeah. Which it's software that does exactly that. And my concern in working with them was that I don't know that the everyday average person is super motivated by like data-driven decisions about their healthcare, but those who are definitely are. I would definitely fit into that category. I would think that that is something really interesting, but I wasn't sure if everybody would be as equally interested in an opportunity like that.
What does it do?
It's supposed to, I mean, to track what you just said. You know, you can track your supplements, you can track your medications, you can track your doctor's appointments. I believe there's a way to communicate potentially with healthcare providers. It's supposed to be pretty well-rounded from what I understand. And I do think it's been released in the App Store. It's called Human.
Interesting. Thank you. As a person who's autistic myself, have you ever experienced someone who seems to be upset with all that you have accomplished? I feel I find a lot of people who seem to be upset with me, maybe because their family members can't do all that I can.
Probably. I'm sure I've gotten comments online talking about that for sure. I don't know that I've ever encountered that directly, you know, face to face. And if I have, they you know, probably wouldn't have said it to me directly. Maybe would have said it about me, but probably not to me. And I definitely sympathize with that experience. That's, you know, from what I understand, I've not experienced it myself, but from what I understand, you know, parents of children on the spectrum go through a lot of grief in terms of expectations that might be altered now. And I definitely have a lot of empathy and compassion toward that experience, despite that not being my experience.
Thank you. Someone said, I like the fingerprint as a symbol. It was especially difficult for me as someone who was not diagnosed until adulthood. Parental and societal differences hindered any consideration of me being brought to be evaluated in childhood. Do you find when you interact with people who were not diagnosed until later in adulthood that there are differences with how they have tried to or learned to mask or hide their autism in public or workspaces versus someone who learned why they were different earlier on?
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I feel like my experience with that phenomenon specifically really is exclusively online. You know, the people that I come in contact with on a day-to-day basis in a clinical setting are people who have been formally diagnosed and for the majority of their lives have been aware of their autism diagnosis. And so it's really not news to them. And that's primarily the majority of my encounters in person. And as far as online, from what I understand, a lot of people feel a lot of like internalized shame about their wants and needs. And I might feel the same way if I had that experience. That sounds really difficult.
Yeah. Do you have a preferred identifying label when it comes to ASD? Like, do you prefer to be called an individual diagnosed with ASD or autistic or what?
No, I don't have a preference. I use both interchangeably.
You're very comfortable speaking. Did you begin giving presentations at a young age, or what other experiences did you have that helped develop this skill?
I had some smaller experiences with presentations kind of on and off throughout school, high school, really, you know, with Project Hope. They would have their end of the year program or whatever, where I would say a couple words for maybe 5 minutes. And so, you know, this is not entirely new to me, but I've had a lot of practice in the last year and a half.
Okay. And what is your preferred method of communication?
With who?
You don't know. Kim? Maybe it's like with a media question?
Email.
Email, okay. What's your relationship like with your siblings? How do you support, how do they support you and you support them?
Sometimes when they're not busy, they hang out with me. A lot of times they are busy and they don't hang out with me, or you know, my brother, he just turned 18, so he's gotten his first job and he's been working a lot, which is great. So we'll sometimes visit him at his job. And so that's been nice. My sister, she has been in school for the last several years to be a medical assistant. And so, you know, I don't get to see her a whole lot, but when I do, you know, we usually go to dinner and catch up. And so that's been nice.
Good. I think we have time for maybe just a few more. It seems that there have been several instances across the country where a person with ASD ends up gravely fatally injured at the hands of law enforcement because they lack the training to recognize signs of a meltdown or episode, meaning the law enforcement. Have you guys had to implement teaching certain skills or safety actions on the part of the individual on the spectrum that you all work with?
Yeah, definitely. You know, following certain instructions, especially instructions from people you don't know very well, is a skill that some people have to practice. And that is something that we as an organization have definitely set up opportunities so that people can be successful in their encounters throughout the world, even if it's with people that they don't know very well. It's definitely something to practice for sure.
Okay. What personal characteristics help you work effectively with students with autism? For example, are you patient? Are you firm? What are you?
I am a self-described weenie. I'm not firm. I am the complete polar opposite of firm. There is, you know, when I have structure, it's not just kind of a one big free for all. There's certainly structure and you know, boundaries certainly, but I do not have a whole lot of rules or expectations on how a session should go when I interact with a client, so long as they are safe and we are, you know, providing learning opportunities. I am, you know, very go with the flow. I can kind of take on whatever it is the kid loves. They love Pokemon, and suddenly now I love Pokemon. They love Minecraft, now I love Minecraft. You know, it's very easy for me to kind of jump in and kind of go along with whatever their preferences are.
So that's the key, right? Is to join them with their preference and be together in that way. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kaylin. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm sorry if some of your questions weren't answered. I think we got through just about all of them. I think it was, you were very easy to talk to, and you answered the questions in a really interesting way, and I certainly learned a lot, so thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And lastly, I want to thank everyone again for joining us. We hope to see you at our upcoming events. This is for Yale School Tri-State Disability Art Show, which is pretty popular, I would say, very popular. Opening reception is Friday, April 26th from 6 to 9. Art show gallery hour Saturday, April 27th from 10 to 3. Then we also have a symphony in C, Friday, May 10th at 7 at the Yale School Performing Arts Center. To RSVP, please visit yaleschoolnj.com/events. Thank you, Kaylin.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.